Hi, my name's Dr. David Scratchley. I'm a psychologist who works in Seattle, Washington. I study addiction and work with people who are addicted, help treat the condition of addiction in both adolescents and adults. And today I'd like to talk with you about drugs of the stimulant class. I do have a presentation for you today. It's called Crank, Crack, and Meth, the updated story, and I encourage you to go to my website, www.drugseminars.net, where for no charge, for free, you can download this particular study guide as well as videos and study guides for other issues related to drug abuse, as well as access other information which you might find useful if in fact you are coping with the issue of addiction in a family member. Now, as we get into this presentation, I'd like to begin by telling you that there are a number of different types of stimulants that people use, and two of the most familiar are crank and crack. So crank being methamphetamine and crack being a form of cocaine. What we discover is that in rural parts of America, crank and meth are actually epidemics. So if you live in a county that's rural or with 50,000 or less people in your county, you're probably looking at the issue of methamphetamine somewhere in your particular region. Likewise, if you get into the cities, we discover that crack cocaine seems to be a more common type of compound, but neither is exclusive. Certainly there is cocaine in the rural parts of America, and there's methamphetamine or crank in the cities. So really, when we start to talk about both of these are very powerful stimulants, and I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about methamphetamine. Here's some photos of methamphetamine. On your left you have two types, sort of a crystal white powder and then a brownish powder that they call peanut butter. To your right you have a very pure form of methamphetamine called ice or glass. Now, methamphetamine is sort of the king of the amphetamines. There are many other types of amphetamines, and for example, if you know somebody who's taking the drug Adderall, for instance, somebody with attentional deficit disorder, they're taking three forms of amphetamine: biphetamine, dextro, and levoamphetamine. But methamphetamine is the addict's favorite because it goes to the brain so quickly. When that particular compound, methamphetamine or crank, is purified, highly purified, and quality control is at its top, what we get is a very, very clear crystal we call ice or glass. And of course, this is one of the most powerful drugs. It's devastating. It causes a profound state of agitation. If you're using crank or you're using glass or ice, you'll discover that you might be up for days or even weeks on end without sleeping as a result of just the powerful stimulation this causes in the nervous system. Needless to say, as the drug reaches sort of this ceiling where it can't stimulate you anymore, you go into a very deep depression. The depression can be one that leaves you vegetative and stuporous for days or even weeks on end following the use of the drug. People who use this particular drug typically look very poor poor in health because their teeth and their skin become all scarred. Their teeth die because the blood flow is cut off to the teeth, and the amphetamine is able to cut through the enamel. And what we discover is that the arm, for example, in this particular photo has skin ulcers due to the fact the person is scratching his or her arm from the feeling that there's bugs or something crawling underneath the skin. And often people have dirt in their fingernails, and especially if they're involved with drugs, because it can, drugs are typically used in pretty dirty settings. So what happens here is people get these terrible infections. You've maybe heard in the news of MRSA or other things like this. These abscesses are absolutely devastating for people and extremely common for people who use meth. Now, if people smoke a stimulant, you can get into all sorts of lung disease, especially if you smoke, for instance, the drug Ritalin, which is used to treat ADHD and some other related neurological conditions. The person can get into a condition where the lung is so damaged it might be so serious as to even cause the person to get sick enough to die from it. People who use a lot of methamphetamine tend to be chronically fatigued. They may be anorexic, very skinny because they aren't eating or drinking, and they may be candidates for cardiac arrest. Now, when people are on this particular drug, they behave in various manners, and not just for methamphetamine, but for cocaine or crack too. People show movement problems. So for instance, people who are smoking or using methamphetamine tend to fidget quite a lot. They may gaze at something and be hyper-focused. They can't stop looking at it. They may repeat behaviors time and time and time again, and we call this stereotypic behavior. For example, taking keys off a key ring and putting them back on. They're paranoid. They tend to be very paranoid people. They may think people are out to harm them or looking through their windows or their door peepholes, and they may even hallucinate and hear people or see people or see things that aren't there, and this makes a state of toxicity or overdose any type of stimulant, but especially methamphetamine, often very dangerous to people around them because the person will become very irrational. Now, when people have used this drug and they stop, they can fall into a very significant depression. We find in treatment people tend to spend months where they just don't feel good following the last use of the drug. But we need to know that even in this case that people do get better and start to recover from this, and when they do, they're going to be restored in terms of their ability to enjoy things. So even though you do get depressed when you stop the drug, it's a depression that you can handle if you stay the course and you don't start using again. But the urge to use, to overwhelm that depression, is very, very hard for people. So we call this period of treatment the wall, where the person is depressed and has to cope with things. Now, additionally, we can see with cocaine that people, again, can use this, but it's shorter acting. Cocaine and methamphetamine begin, the high feeling may be very similar, but people know very quickly that cocaine is cocaine and meth is meth, because the high ends very rapidly with cocaine and it's terminated very quickly, whereas meth goes on and on. So this is crack in these photos here, and crack, like ice, is a smokable form of cocaine, ice being a smokable form of methamphetamine. When people become addicted to crack, it is extremely powerful. It consumes their entire life. Once they use the drug, even after one episode, they may be hopelessly addicted. Now, one of the interesting things I've noticed in younger people is what we call foilies, where people are taking aluminum foil, putting baking soda and powdered cocaine together and a little bit of water, and what this does is actually make crack cocaine, but people call it foilies, which I think sanitizes the notion of using cocaine somewhat, but it's still cocaine, and in fact it really is a form of something that's an awful lot like crack if you're using it. So what we see here then is that cocaine is really deadly, especially when combined with alcohol. Cocaine is an extremely deadly compound, and we discovered people combine it with alcohol, OxyContin, and with heroin. OxyContin and heroin they combine it with so that they can take more of the heroin or OxyContin because it stimulates the heart, the cocaine does, and stimulates breathing, so the person is able to maybe take a larger dose. But of course cocaine wears off quickly and the heroin or the OxyContin very slow, so that people can get into very life-threatening overdoses when they do that. So I'd like to thank you for listening to my discussion of cocaine and crank and meth and crack today, and hopefully you found it useful. I invite you again to go to my website at any time, and that website is www.drugseminars.net. You can download the slides for free, the ones used in this video and in other videos in the series, and feel free to contact me at seattleclinical@gmail.com if I can answer a question for you.